Hello and welcome to Ask Greg Stream again. Tonight I am joined by John Kilmister. I'm just going to add John straight in. John, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good to have you on. How are you? All good?
Yeah, all good here.
Yeah, I've not spoken to you for a wee while, so it's good to catch up.
Yeah.
So tonight we'll just have a chat about things in general, because the last time I spoke to you, you were kind of looking for a new job. So let's start off with that. In fact, do a wee bit of an intro. I keep jumping into questions and forget to ask people. Give us a wee intro for people who don't know who John Kilmister is.
Yeah, so I'm a software architect, but specializing in Azure and C# and how they kind of fit together. So bit of an interesting journey, kind of how I got into that area.
Okay.
I started off a long time ago, and right back at the beginning, did I want to do hardware, software, and I fell on the software side. But over the time, I kind of moved a bit more into the middle ground, I guess.
Same as me. That's interesting. Yeah, it's good to have someone who's got the same background as me, because all I deal with is all these ops people who are like, oh, devs go away. I'm all getting sticks. So yeah, it's good to speak to you and have you on. So I'm just going to say a quick hello to Eunice and Andrew. Andrew, hi Eunice, nice to have you on. Right, so you've moved over towards Azure, which is good. So tell me about before you were looking for a job. What was your kind of background?
So I've been at a company for a number of years, 6 or 7 years. And when I joined that company, it was a brand new IT team,
nice.
a new software engineering team, should I say. They decided to bring the IT in-house. And that was a great opportunity because it was all greenfield, so all new products. And we could take all the good things that we'd learned over the previous years. There was a small group of us. And that's when we picked Azure. And that's when I first started sort of getting into it. And that must have been, I'm trying to think back now. It would have been 2014, something like that. Yeah, maybe, back 2014, 2015, something like that. Mm-hmm. I worked at that company and the team grew and grew. I think by the time I left, there was about 40 or 50 engineers. Mm-hmm. And during that sort of 6 or 7 years that I was there, I did all sorts of roles. I mean, when the team's really small, as people may be aware that when a team's small, you kind of have to wear many hats and you do a bit of everything. And then as the team grows, the people who've been there longest often get like team leadership responsibilities and then people management responsibilities and various other things. And as the team grows, you move into new areas and new technologies. So I did Xamarin with mobile apps and looked how we could deploy that. We had lots of new innovations, different countries to go into, internationalization. Some of the things I'd done before, but again, with a slightly different spin on it. So by the time I got to being there a number of years, I was kind of, it wasn't the job that I had when I started. And I kind of grown up in a different way and the company was growing in a different direction. And it was just time to move on. A great company to work for, but sometimes you just get to that point where you just want to do something different and have a fresh start. So that was about a year and a half ago. I started looking for a new role, and I was a bit like, well, what do I look for?
Do I want to
go? That's why I kind of had a chat with you at that point, actually. Just work out for myself what I wanted to do. I could go more people orientated and become like a technical manager and maybe kind of focus on the people side of things, or really kind of double down on the technical side. And that's what I felt like I enjoyed the most. So it was
I remember asking you, like, what did you like and I always try and do like the Venn diagram where you've got what do you like, what do you not like, and what's in the middle that you could deal with, like the best bits of both.
It was interesting. Towards the end of my previous role, I was spending like half of my time doing people management and managerial bits and pieces, and the other half of the time being a technical lead. And a lot of people look to you as a technical lead to answer all of the questions. And without being able to give 100% to either, I didn't feel I was really like fulfilling the job. So I think I could have been a better people manager if I'd had 100% focus on that and could really focus on that. And equally, from a technical point of view, I felt a little bit lost at times because I hadn't got the time to invest in understanding things. So I decided in the new role, I wanted to be focused on one or the other, and I decided the technical side of things.
No, that's a good choice, because it's quite an interesting point, especially as you get older and you kind of get to the point where you need to start, when we're going to be doing management. And then I think you're very like me. We both kind of did the same sort of thing. We both fell into management and I didn't not like it, but it just wasn't really what I wanted to do day to day. So it sounds like you were sort of similar.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it is definitely it is a skill that you can develop, much like your technical skills, but there is a very different timeline on it. When you're writing code, you're getting immediate feedback. When you're writing features, especially as I was doing for a big public company, you would develop a feature over a month with a team, but then it would go out into the world and people would give you instant feedback. When you're helping people in their careers, the feedback cycle is a lot longer. It's a very different kind of experience, and it's a different skill set that you need to work on. And it takes time to build up those skills and build up those things. So
definitely, it's not as if you can just pick up a book and start reading about it and become good at it. You need to kind of try things, and it's quite difficult actually. Soft skills are really difficult.
Yeah, but I think they are important, and I think that the skills that I learned through the line management work that I did do are still applicable now, much as every skill is that you pick up as you go along. I think communication. Some people ask, kind of from a development perspective, what should I learn and what should I build my skills in? And in a way, although it's a bit of a cliche, the communication skills are just as important. Being able to stand up and talk in front of a department of 80 people to explain your concept and sell your ideas and bring the team along is really important. Because if you don't do that, if you just say, okay, this is the way the technical direction we're going, which is part of my role at the moment, is to help, bring in new technologies and new direction. If you can't bring people along, if you can't explain and communicate your reasons behind it, then it's a non-starter. So I think there's a lot of skills that are transferable.
So how did you go about finding the next move? Talk us through what you did to try and figure out what you wanted to do.
Yeah, so one thing I had learned over my career, because I had a couple of different jobs, were the different types of companies that there are. And I think I'm a lot. I speak to the university once a year, go talk to the students who are just entering the job market and kind of think back on the things that I wish I knew back then. It's an interesting thought process. But one of them is definitely understanding that there are different types of companies and each of them offer a very different experience. You might be taking a role at an agency, for example, like a marketing agency. And that's a very different role than building in-house software or in-house networks, or in working in a large organization, providing things for that organization, which is very different from consultancy. And so there's all these different things that I don't think I necessarily appreciated early on in my career. But going into this job search, I had that kind of understanding, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take a conscious thought. And I guess I was in a privileged position. Once you get a bit more experience, and if the market is on your side, where there's more jobs than there are people looking for them, you get the opportunity to be a bit more picky. And I realized that's a very privileged position to be in, but it was the position I was in. So I could be a bit more picky on the type of roles. So I had to decide what type of company I wanted to work for. And the only real way of doing that was to speak to them. So I spoke to some large consultancy firms. I spoke to some really small consultancy firms. I also then looked at in-house teams. That's what I've typically always done, is work for built software for and systems for companies, be that e-commerce systems that they then sell their products on, or other things like that. So it's like, by speaking to the companies, you get a rough idea of how they work and what it's going to be like, and a little bit about the culture, because your boss and the culture, it really can it can either make or break your job.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about that. I find it easier to figure out what I don't want than what I'm looking for. Sometimes it's easier to rule out companies, but when you said about culture there, do you I don't think a lot of people who are certainly younger ask about that kind of stuff. But when you get more experience, it becomes a bit more important, I think, to ask about the culture and kind of what do you do for this, and what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean the whole interview process is quite hard.
Mhm.
You know, you have an hour, 2 hours, you know, to understand these things, and obviously the company are trying to sell as much as they
Yeah.
are, much as you are. So it can be hard to see through what it's really like, but you can definitely get a feel um, from looking around and having a kind of a general learn about the company a little bit, but
Mhm.
beforehand. When it comes to culture, I think the thing you initially think of is, okay, does everybody have like, I don't know, a Friday pub session or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I think it's more than that. It's about having that flexibility and understanding, and like the company I work at now, a large number of the people have been there 10, 15, 20 years.
Right,
And
okay.
that says a lot. It doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily say about the culture, but it does
Yeah.
add to the story of the team that you're going to be going into. Um, some of the companies I interviewed with, they were honest. They said we lost the entire development team and we're rebuilding it. And I knew
Right.
going into that organization, that would be a new type of challenge, but it
Mhm.
also raises some other questions
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
well, why and how, and as long as you're going in eyes wide open and you understand
Mhm.
that might be the
Yeah, yeah.
challenge you want. But that's what the culture aspect is about from the outside, is trying to understand, you know, what it's like. Is it a fast-paced company? Are they getting a lot of money injected into them for, say, private equity, and the company's growing? Or is it a company that is that is kind of not necessarily stagnant, but maybe using older technologies and they don't have a plan to upgrade them?
Mhm.
Some of the companies I interviewed, they said, we were talking about cloud. So when I looked for a job, I had a list of musts, and the two musts really for me were, from a technology point of view, were Azure, because I'd
Mhm.
spent the last 7 years doing
Yeah, yeah.
it,
Yep.
Azure MVP, and I wanted to stick with that. Um, and C sharp, because I wanted to stick with, from the
Yep.
programming side and my knowledge, that's where my skill set was. Um, but yeah, speaking to some companies about their journey into the cloud, some of them hadn't started,
Okay.
and that's fine. I thought, oh, that's an interesting
Mhm.
challenge. But speaking to them a bit more, they didn't really want to go all in on it. And
Right,
it was
okay.
like, well, we've got our technology stack, we've got someone here already who's defined it, and we don't really deviate from that. And
Mhm.
some people like that. Some people like that
Yeah,
kind of knowing what they're
yeah.
going into. But
Yep.
I think what I was looking for in a role was somewhere that I could add value, that I could really, that I could help shape the future. I didn't necessarily want to be the person that
Yeah.
was giving it architectural direction, but I wanted to be part of that story and part of
Mhm.
the
Yeah, yeah.
the journey. So that's what I was looking for in a company, and a culture was one that was very looking forward, looking to the future, and how they can evolve where they are now to where they want to be. I decided I didn't want to join a company that had everything in place, and the job was just to keep the lights on and keep things, evolving forward. And equally, I didn't want a company that sounded like that they were kind of stuck in their ways, might be a little bit too harsh a way of putting
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
but not necessarily having a clear goal of being in a particular place from a technology point of view. Their focus was on the
Mhm.
different parts of the organization than the IT element. So
So how did you eventually come about finding the job? How did that come about? Was that somebody you knew, or did you just pick one of these companies, or?
So I did a number of interviews. Interestingly, I don't know if it's how things are changing in the market generally, or it might have been where I am in my career with a bit more experience. I had a lot of informal conversations,
Yeah.
people, just informal chats, get to know about the companies. They may or may not have a role, that kind of chat. And some people gave me some pointers. They said, oh, okay, you're in this geographical area. Have you thought about talking to this consultancy firm?
Mhm.
They're a small
Yep.
agency, they're local to you. Go and have a chat. And I did that with a couple of companies. Then I also had some calls with some larger companies, which are always advertising, and thought,
Yeah, yeah.
approach them, have a chat. But the actual role that I ended up with, came about through someone I met at a user group.
Networking, you were networking with people. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a funny thing in which at the time I just asked around, you know, does anyone have you know, work at somewhere that's got an interesting job offering, and yeah, they hadn't at the time, but time went on, and as I was going through and talking to these other companies, I was actually quite close to going forward with one of them, but it fell through for reasons beyond my control. And coincidentally, one of someone that I'd mentioned to about a month or so before that I was looking for a role came back and said, "Are you still looking?" And they passed my details on, and I had some conversations and kind of went from there.
Cool. So how long have you been at your current place now?
Yes, I've been. Oh, it was February of last year, so a year and a half roughly. So,
and was it everything? Is it everything that you hoped it would be? Is it better than you thought, or?
It's quite a different type of company, but I'm enjoying it. So, I at the previous company. So I was previously at Pure Gym, the gym company, a very fast-paced team. It was really exciting, and very much you build a product, you get customer feedback, and it was a very, very kind of interactive kind of process. And we were using Azure and C# and everything. But because I've been there a little while, a lot of people, a lot of the software engineering team would come to me for the answers, and I became very much a center for those answers. And so moving to the new company, I knew that I would have a lot to learn. I wasn't going to grow up with the product or with the software there. I'm going to go into a new team, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't the only architect either. There was a team of people I could bounce ideas off and things. So
that's always good.
I have that in the new company. It's we're building software as a service, so it's a very different model. So I'm a lot more distant from the customer, but I'm actually working more with the software engineering teams and the operations teams, making sure that you know, the DevOps processes are there, that we have a good rollout, and we're also modernizing parts of the software, moving over to more microservices, utilizing Azure better and more cost effectively. So I can bring the skills that I've got in Azure and in C# together again, but not so much from a product point of view, more from a internal point of view. So it's quite different, and the organization I'm working for works at a different pace, and there are other considerations with sort of e-commerce and which I'd worked out previously, and Pure Gym, which was the last role. It was quite important that we iterated and innovated very quickly. The new role of the new company, it's slightly different. The environment's different. We still need to innovate and still need to move forward, but there are other considerations that we need to take into account. So yeah, it's quite a different job, but I find a really supportive company. The culture, as we talked about, is really good, and there's a nice group of people I can bounce ideas off. Yeah, so working out really well.
Sounds like I was going to say, it sounds like it worked out. I was always pleased when people that I know are looking for jobs and end up somewhere good, so that's good. So I was looking into some of your other bits and bobs. Let's talk about your exam. So you sat the AZ 400 in March.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that exam, because that's an interesting exam, is it not? Was it what you thought it would be when you took the exam, or was there any surprises in there?
Yeah, so it was interesting one. So it'd been on my list for a little while. So when I probably about a year before I was looking for my job, I found when I'm a little bit less happy with my job, I look outside for things to fill that gap, and doing the Azure exams was a good way of doing that. Broaden my knowledge, consolidate what I already do know, and kind of build on that. So I initially did the developer exam, the AZ 204, and then I decided to go off and do the solutions architect exam. And the AZ 400 is the DevOps exam, and that is kind of an upgrade, might be the wrong word, but the prerequisite is to do the developer exam. So it had always kind of been on my periphery that actually the AZ 400 might be a good one to do, because I'd already got the prerequisite, and I was doing more work in Azure DevOps. So yeah, after not having done exams for a little while, probably 9 months, something like that, I decided to tackle that one. I'm trying to think back now. It's a little while ago. I thought, yeah, the content was the first thing, I guess, is that even though the exam is I think it's titled Azure DevOps. No, DevOps.
Yeah.
Is it DevOps for Azure? I think can't remember which around.
I'm not really sure. DevOps and Azure or something like that.
Yeah, but the key thing is it is not the product Azure DevOps, and that I think is the first mistake that you might make. So when you look at it,
I've made that mistake because I did the beta of this exam when it first came out, thinking I know Azure DevOps. I've been using Azure DevOps for a while, and then it was like ask me questions about Jenkins and TFS, and I was like, oh. So
yeah,
there was no prep for the exam, and I was like, this is not what I expected, because it just came out and I booked it because it was like first 300 people to register, get it free or whatever it was, and I was like, oh, I'll do that. And then I was like, failed the beta, and I was like, that was just not what I was expecting. So yeah, I get caught out with that, to be honest with you. It was a lot about stupid, or a lot about too fast off the thing. So you sat the exam,
and it's a naming problem, isn't it? I mean, it's if you were to look at it from the outside, it is how to do DevOps on the Azure platform rather
that's
than
exactly what it should.
Yeah,
totally. I wonder how many folk have been caught out with that. There's probably been more than just me. I'm hoping there's more than just me.
Yeah. So it was interesting because the tools, it's quite broad and it's in what it asks around the tools. So we're not just sticking to Microsoft technologies, and I wouldn't say they're obscure, but there are quite a broad range of tools that are in use. And luckily, although I did my research and I did my exam prep and all the rest of it, I'd actually had experience with a wide range of those tools. So there were a number of them that popped up, and I was like, I think there may have even been one on the exam which popped up, and I hadn't looked at that during the prep time, but I had luckily understood and used it before I knew exactly what it was for. So my experience, I've done quite a bit around the DevOps side of things. At PureGym, we were doing continuous deployment, so every check-in would eventually, once it passed all its tests and everything, would go straight out, which was a really interesting, exciting process to move towards that, and to eventually we ran it for a number of years that way. So yeah, I've been involved in that. So from that point, it was I guess my experience kind of came in quite useful.
Do you think people could pass that? I'm asking this because one of my friends at work's studying for it, and he's like, I don't know this stuff. And I was like, yeah, but you don't do DevOps stuff. You know, I think it's quite a difficult exam for people who aren't doing DevOps kind of work day to day.
Yeah, especially if you stick into one ecosystem. So if you're a Java person and you're deploying Java code in GitHub, and that on its own isn't going to be enough experience. Likewise, if you just stick with Azure DevOps, or there are other tools and other things that you need to know about, and then there are the processes that go behind it, and some of the acronyms and those various bits. Because
it's difficult to learn. I think sometimes you need to like crack open a VM and install Jenkins on it and start playing about with it before you'll get anywhere with this exam. It's kind of weird. Yeah, I got caught with
it. I quite liked it though, in a way. I think it was different than the other ones that I'd done before, but it was in a way more aligned to the stuff that I'd done than the other exams. So when I took the solutions architect exam, I started on that journey not really understanding what it entailed, and they have realigned them now, so it makes more sense. So when I took it, you took two separate exams that weren't on any other path. So there was the design and then the technologies exam. And now they've aligned it so that you do your 202, I think it is, the systems administrator, and then you take a further exam. And to me, that makes a lot more sense, because after doing it, coming from a developer background, I did feel a little bit out of place, because it was okay, how to manage users, file systems, moving people from on-prem into the cloud. And my background was all sort of cloud native and developer and like PaaS and Azure Functions. And then it's asking how we migrate things, which is an important thing to learn. And it was really useful. I did the labs and learned those. But yeah, that was quite outside. And the developer exam was a little bit more, but it was more how to use the Azure platform with a developer slant on it.
Yes.
So it wasn't like the old developer exams back in right back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there isn't really an offering for developers to do a programming type exam anymore with Microsoft.
Which is a shame. I don't know why that is.
I don't know, but I imagine if it did exist, it would be more like this DevOps exam, because when I did do some of the Microsoft exams back in 2005, 2006, the developer ones, and they were very much like Microsoft focused, how to use Visual Studio, how to use the wizards, and open source in the C# community was still a thing back then, but it wasn't as big. But it was very much the Microsoft way of doing things. That's what you were being tested on. These days, if they were to do one, I imagine it would be very different, because as a developer, you pick up, you use a whole wide range of technologies from different open source areas, from different languages. It's not just about one language these days. You know, JavaScript on the front end, it might be Node on the back end, it might be Java on the back end, it might be C# on the back end. So it's, if they were to do an exam around it, maybe it just, it's too broad.
Too much. I think it'd be too broad. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about a couple of your blog posts, if you don't mind. So, putting your application to the test with Azure Load Test. Tell me about what you were doing with Azure Load Test.
So that was interesting. I've done load tests a number of times, and actually I've done a couple of talks on it as well. And I've helped organize the load tests, and also helped teams with them. But I didn't get too involved myself with them. And they had all been with JMeter. So for people who don't know, JMeter is a piece of software, goes back to the 1980s. It's a Java application. And you build up your journey. You build up your journey of your test, and then you add simulated users, and you say, okay, run that test with 1,000 simulated users. One of the challenges is that once you run your test, all you get out of JMeter is the response times and the status codes. So it's quite black box. You're hitting it from the outside. And you have to manage all the servers yourself. So if you want to hit it with 1,000 users from 5 geographical locations, you either have to set up virtual machines everywhere, or you can use a third-party solution like BlazeMeter and things like that. So in the current company where I'm at the moment, they had a large JMeter suite, like a lot of companies do. And they were gathering the data from JMeter, as kind of explained, the raw data, and also a load of information from Azure. So we had Azure dashboards, and we were copying and pasting information from all of the metrics from all the servers into spreadsheets in order to do that, in order to kind of analyze it. Because let's say JMeter is a black box. It can tell you your site's slow, and it can tell you roughly what page, but you need to dig deeper and look at the server metrics. Is it hardware? Is it software? What's the bottleneck? Because something I say in my talk actually is that your application will break. Given the right conditions and enough load, your application will always break. Even the software written by the best people will break somewhere. And the key point is understanding where that breakage is, and moving that breakage so far to the right that it doesn't matter. So, you know, if it's going to break at 1 million users and you're only ever going to get 10,000, then that's where you want to be. But if you run your load test and it all breaks, you know, only at 5,000 users, and you're not going to make your 10,000, that you can then go back and you can reevaluate. And that's the important thing about a load test, is that you don't want to find out on Black Friday that your website dies because you've got customers there with money in their hand wanting to pay. So that's what a load test is. So going back to the question about like Azure load test, that was a really interesting product offering because it meant that we could bring the two things together. We could bring the Azure metrics that we had in dashboards, and we could bring the JMeter data together and start overlaying them on graphs without any manual work, or at least that was the initial kind of offering. But yeah, it hasn't. Azure load test is a good offering, but it does have its it's still quite young, I guess, and there are still a few things that are a little bit that has some challenges with it.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that Microsoft bring out to begin with is like that, and then they build on it. So hopefully they'll build on it and it'll get better. I used it, and what was interesting was I used it on my MVP subscription on a testing, and I actually got billed. My credit card got billed, even though I've got credits, and that was a bit of a shock. I was a bit like, whoa. Yeah, and it's because I used the load test and did a certain, I don't know what I did, but I never really looked into it because it wasn't a lot of money because I was very careful. But I was quite surprised that my credit card got charged. Yeah,
I didn't have that experience, but the cost is probably the biggest challenge to it. It feels like what they've done is they've hooked it up so you can put it into continuous delivery. So each time you do a deploy, just you can then put it into your staging environment, run a load test for say a minute or two, and then go, yeah, we haven't degraded performance, and then we'll carry on. So from a CI/CD point of view, that's where it feels like its sweet spot is. If you've got a 3-hour load test that you have historically, and you want to run that for like hundreds and hundreds of users for hours and hours a month, it's going to get very expensive very quickly. And that is the biggest challenge with it, is that it has its sweet spot, but at the moment I would say that the pricing, if you've got a 3-hour load test that you want to run more than once a month, the cost doesn't, it's cheaper to put it onto a virtual machine, although say you do lose those benefits of lose those other benefits.
The other blog post I thought was really interesting is enhancing accessibility, building a read page for web pages using Azure Speech Service and C#. Tell us a lot about that. Yeah, that one was brilliant. I've seen that. I've seen the thing that you're talking about in that blog post. So I'll let you describe it so that I don't spoil it. What's that all about then?
Yes. So I host my blog. It's just myself. It's on a Azure static web app, and it's just a React. It's a React app that gets converted into static HTML. And yeah, like you, I'd seen the little thing at the top of lots of websites now that allow you to read the read the blog post for you, and it's actually something that I do on all my posts. So I'm dyslexic, and one of the things I struggle to do is to write something and then read it back to myself and understand what it says. Sometimes I'll read what I think it is. So for pretty much all the time I've been writing my blog, I use a screen reader to read my posts back to me to make sure that they make sense and it is what I intended to write. And I found this useful on other websites as well. And it's useful. There are these little bars at the top that say play this. And I thought, how hard would that be to actually kind of build yourself? And I'd actually seen it on a Microsoft post somewhere. They had a little player at the top and it said built with Azure. It didn't say how, it just said built with Azure. I was like, oh, powered by. And I was like, this has got to be worth a go. So I just sat down one evening, and it didn't take very long to kind of slot the bits together really. And I built a little console app that takes the MDX file that I use, the markdown file. It takes out some of the formatting and some of the things that I don't want, like the code samples, and then turns it into an MP3, which I just put up on blob storage and point the website at it. And the actual player is just a HTML5 built-in player. There's nothing.
Oh, that's even better. I might even give that a try. That sounds awesome. Yeah, that's John's web page, his blog. Sorry for that. I'm going to try that. That sounds awesome, because I did try that and think that's my to-do list for at some point that you'll never get to. But yeah, that's really cool. So it was really quite easy to do. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was easier than I thought, and I didn't realize how many different voices there were. And yeah, I think initially I had a female voice, and my daughter said, "No, you got to change it. You got to change it to a male voice. You got to make it sound a little bit more like you."
Yeah,
But
that's awesome.
yeah, there's a lot of voices, and there's the voice studio, which I think I linked to in there, where you can play about with them. There are different motions that you can put on the voices, something that I didn't do. But you can mark up your the content that you send it to give emotion on various bits and things. So yeah, it's really good. And hey, there is a built-in, you can take a normal web page and use a synthesized voice in a normal web page. It's built into Chrome and built into Edge as well. And there are JavaScript libraries that will do it, but it's a little bit robotic still. It doesn't quite sound as nice as the as what is generated from the Microsoft service.
Definitely need to give that a go. Definitely. So you do a bit of, excuse me. You also do a bit of speaking. Tell us a little bit about doing speaking and kind of what you've got lined up coming up.
Yeah, so the speaking I started back in lockdown, really. So I'd done a lightning talk at a local user group. So just a short 10-minute talk on a particular topic, something that I've been working on. And yeah, someone was watching that and said, "Oh, we're doing lightning talks at it was Don at Sheffield, actually, with with Kevin." And yeah, he said, "Oh, why don't you come along?" And because everything was virtual because of the pandemic and everything, I did that, and then I just kind of built up from there, really. And that's how I kind of got a little bit more into speaking. And I started my blog around the same time. And as far as what I like about it is that you get the feedback, but it also gives you a focus of something to it's the same reason I write the blog, really, is that most of the stuff that I write on my blog isn't stuff that I'm doing in my day job. Like we just mentioned, it's something that I thought, oh, that'll be interesting, and I'll go away and learn it. It gives me a reason to look at something in quite a lot of depth, because I don't want to put something that's wrong out there. And then from that, I will build that up into a blog post, and then from time to time I might turn that into a talk. Someone asked me so, "Oh, can you come talk at our local user group?" And I was like, "And give me 6 months, and I'll pencil something in, and then I go back and I write a talk." So yeah, and there's been some really good conferences that I've been able to be part of. I haven't done any huge conferences. I'm still very nervous about, so who wants to listen to to this thing in such a large stage. So I've tended to stick to smaller user groups at the moment. But yeah, it's been interesting, and I'll do the same talk a number of times to different groups, and each time you learn something, you adapt the talk, you build it in. And I would say to anyone that's thinking about it, don't be afraid about it. If you don't know something, say, "Look, that's not an area I've looked into yet." And then afterwards you can go and look into it. Or if someone goes, "I've had experience in this," it adds to the story and adds to it for the next time. So yeah, so I've got a couple of those. I've got a talk coming up later this year on Azure Blob Storage. That's with I think the Swedish user group, and that's online again. And that came about. So I did a shorter talk on a lifecycle management inside Blob Storage. Actually, it goes back further than that. When I did the Solutions Architect exam, it forced me to take a look again at Blob Storage and storage just more generally. And it's one of those services, it's one of those services that it sounds obvious what it does, but then when you start looking at it, it has all of these features, and they keep adding features continuously to it. And I'm guilty of it, and I'm sure others are as well. Of you spin up a new storage account, you forget about it, and then like you come next time, and someone says, "Oh, you just spin up a new one," and you don't realize necessarily that it gets all these extra features. So, or some of the nuances that the pricing model around storage can be a little bit complicated, and moving things between tiers and things. So I guess the Microsoft exams highlighted that to me, that I should go back and have a deeper look, which I did. And then later on, I thought, I was speaking to some people and I was kind of like, oh, do you realize about this? And they're like, no. And then that turned into a short lightning talk about, blob storage tiers and the early deletion costs and all of those kind of things. And yeah, it kind of developed from there. And then this talk later in the year is a more holistic look, not just about blob storage tiers, but looking at all the different features that are in those storage accounts that have been added over the recent years that people just might not know about, like FTP access and like the metadata and lots of other little bits, really.
Yeah, because I do quite a lot of workshops. And every time I go to do a new workshop, it's maybe one every 3 months. I open up the storage and I'm like, oh, that's new, that's moved. Or like, where did that feature come from? Yeah, things like syncing. We work for a company who need to sync storage quite a lot across regions and stuff like that. It's got loads of stuff that I didn't even realize, and then I was like, "Oh, this is actually really cool."
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a little bit how.
Like
I said, that's a little bit how my last blog post that I put up was about the preview features of Azure Container Registry. Because again, I went in there the other day and it's like, I have been using some of the preview features for a little while, but I was like, oh, there's another one. What does that do? And yeah, I thought I was looking for a topic, so I thought, I'll just do a bit of a roundup of those. So
you blog about the things that you kind of want to learn about and are interested in. That's cool. I kind of blog about. I've got terrible memory, so I always blog about stuff that I do. So I'm thinking, right, if I'm stuck on something at work and I can't find the answer, I'll blog about it so that someone else comes along and finds that answer. But it's usually me like 2 weeks later, and I'm like, oh, I wrote that crap. I've forgotten already. So that's good to you're doing lots of blogs. That's cool.
Yeah, I find the same with my Stack Overflow posts. End up having the question and find out that it's me that's answered it.
I was on your blog for something. I can't mind what it was, but I kept coming back to your blog for something. I'm just trying to have a kind of quick look there, but I didn't see what it was. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but
I think one of my favorite posts was how to separate production and development Azure.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I didn't read that. Let's talk about that. So, I haven't read that blog post. So, what's the kind of main gist of doing that? Because lots of customers ask, do we have separate subscriptions? Do we put them all in one subscription? Do we have tagging, resource groups? What's your thoughts on the best way to go about that?
Yeah, over the time I've changed my kind of opinions on it and things, but because you kind of want as much separation as possible, but then you've kind of got management groups and then permissioning and everything else. And it is one of those blog posts that I go back to actually on a regular basis to look myself to kind of go, what was it the way they recommend now? So off the top of my head, I'll be honest, I can't remember what there was a little while since I wrote that one, but it's one I do keep going back to for that very reason.
I always try and recommend different subscriptions for a start. Because I think it's just easier if it's separation like that.
Yes, yeah. You get that clear separation then between them, and you don't get any because it's too easy to accidentally link something to something else.
Yeah. Especially
that's
if you've not got a good naming convention. Yeah. It's quite difficult because there's multiple ways to do it, and there isn't really a right and a wrong way. You know what? Like sometimes customers are like, I want one subscription, I don't want 3. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Well, if you're doing 1, then here's how you do it. If you're doing 3 subscriptions, then here's how you do it. So there's multiple ways to do it.
Yeah, and you must see lots of different because I've tended to work at companies where something's been set up and then I've kind of joined the company or we're setting it up from scratch, but it's long living and I have to kind of we have to kind of live with the decision and we can see it through and go, actually, let's change it and pivot it and go through that journey. Where I guess you're seeing it from a different angle where you're having different customers with different requirements.
Yeah, totally. And the ones that I like are the ones that are separated, as I said. I'm not really keen on one subscription with different resource groups because if you don't name your resources and your subscription and your resource groups well, it becomes quite tricky to know what's what, and you can get in a bit of a mess. You can separate it with tagging, but that's not really ideal. I don't like the fact that like you've got the same subscription with prod resources and dev resources. I think that's you're borderline looking for trouble when that sort of stuff happens.
Yeah, and having a separate tenant gives you that complete isolation. Then you've got no risk of people accidentally accidentally linking things together. Really, that's the
And a lot of customers don't realize that like a new subscription is like you don't pay for a new subscription. You know, once you've got like your tenant, you just create a new subscription and away you go. It's not really.
Yeah, I'm just having a look back at the blog post actually just to remind myself here. But yeah, it's that. In the summary of it, I talk about there's pros and cons to each really. The separate the recommended approach by Microsoft is to use separate subscriptions because that gives you the most benefit. But in the post, I do remember now, it's a little while since I wrote it. It talks about how you should organize those subscriptions and if you should have a resource group for like your different departments and functionality, or not resource groups, sorry, management groups. Or you put your management groups based on your different environments, so your QA and your test and things like that. So yeah, I definitely recommend people go have a look at it if they're interested in that question. And as I said, it's one of those questions that's quite a hard one to answer, and that's why I put it in the blog post. I could go back and revisit it.
I think on top of that, what's key is to make sure you name your resources well. So like we always do things like resource groups are like RG dash customer name dash environment dash and then we do like WEU for, there's my camera going all blurry again, WEU for West Germany and West Europe and stuff like that. My camera's just playing up today.
Yeah, there is a guide. Microsoft do have a guide on naming.
Yeah, it is. It's very good, to be honest with you. Yeah, everyone should have a look at that, because if you do all resources and you see hundreds, well, for whatever reason, you might be doing something with all these resources. It's good to be able to say, that belongs to that, and that belongs to that. Otherwise, like today, I was looking at storage accounts. So I think it was storage accounts. No, it was VMs, and it was just like VM3, VM4, and I'm like, yeah, but that's, there was all these different VMs in different regions, and I was like, yeah, this is a little bit tricky.
And especially when you're getting into the hundreds of, I've worked with Azure subscriptions that have hundreds and hundreds of storage accounts, and not having a good naming convention.
Yeah, storage accounts are difficult because they're not really, none of them are really well named. Because of the requirements in naming, it becomes a lot bit tricky.
Yeah.
So I also saw you do a bit of mentoring, or you did do a bit of mentoring. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed talking. So we talked a little bit about, giving prepared like talks and things. But yeah, I've enjoyed kind of having those conversations with people about how things work, the different options that you can do for different things. And I took that into doing a bit of mentoring. And I did that through, there was a code camp for people who were just about to start on their journey. So,
cool.
Yeah, we did. It was Azure Functions in JavaScript, and it was a 6-week program. And I just met with them once a week, and they did some initial learning. There was some learning modules that they did, and then they had a project to work on, and they could ask questions about the tech industry or about their individual project, or if they got stuck. So yeah, I just met with them once with a small group of 2 or 3 people individually. Met with them once a week. And we talked about the industry. We talked about the project that they were working on, the challenges they were having. And it's really, I think, working with junior developers or people who are newer to the technologies is a great way of learning yourself
100%.
as much as helping them. There's all the things that you can help them with, things that you wish you knew at the beginning, but equally, they'll ask questions you've never thought of. And
100%.
Yeah, and it's really good to be able to go, I'll go away and have a look at that for you, or that's a question I'd not thought of. But some of the things actually on my blog have come out of those kind of questions. And I'd done a lot of work with junior people in the organizations I'd worked in. But 2 years ago, I decided that I'd start doing a bit more kind of with this group. Awesome. And then not so much mentoring, but at the local university, they were they bring in industry experts into once a year and do like a half-hour session to the students. They can get an idea what the real world is like in different parts of the technology sector. And that's been really good as well doing that.
Sounds good. I had a question. So yeah, I'm teaching AZ 900 to people in our company who are doing finance. So like finance people are doing AZ 900, and they're like, "So explain networking to me." And I'm like, "Yeah." So teaching people is a really good way to learn. I'm learning like how to try and explain stuff to like, you know, obviously explain stuff to a 5-year-old, but it's difficult. So you have to kind of. I've found that the best way to teach these people who don't use Azure day in day out is to try and relate it to something that they do. So I'm always saying like, if you're doing SaaS, it's like doing your spreadsheet thing, or you're using Spotify. You know, people can relate to stuff like that. But that's my way of kind of making people go, okay, I've got a better understanding of it now.
Yeah, it's about anchoring it to something they already know, and then they can build on that. I think that is really useful, just generally when you're trying to explain concepts. And I think the echo's back.
Oh, sorry, is it? Oh, I'm going to click settings and try and get the echo away again. Yeah. Right,
but yeah, I find that I often have to explain things at different levels in the role that I have had in the past. So you might be talking to a colleague in the marketing department, and then you'll be over in the finance department. And actually, the people who are working in finance seem to get different sets of technologies than the people in the marketing department, because they've got different points of reference. And then you might be talking to an operations person who is, you know, they know networking inside out, they know how to set up a domain controller and all of those things, but I've got software that I need to deliver, and I need to explain to them how it works and how it fits into their ecosystem. So and then equally, I need to be able to convey things to fellow developers or other engineers to put my side across, or to listen to them and hear their points of view and go, actually, you know, take on board what they've got to say. So I think being able to level your technical conversation is useful really in whatever kind of area you're in.
Yeah, definitely. I also found that we went through all the courseware for AZ 900, and I was kind of trying to relate it to it. But the minute I went into the portal and started showing people, that was when they all went, right, okay. So like me, I'm a visual learner. I don't think I can read a book and learn stuff. I need to get on Azure and start playing about it, and then I'll do it. And I could see everybody kind of going, "Yeah, I'm not really getting this." And then the minute I was like, "This is a tenant, and this is a subscription, this is a resource group," and I was showing them policy, because policy, they were like, "What's policy?" It wasn't really registering it. And then when I went in and set all policies up, they were like, "Right, now we get it." And I'm like, "Okay, I kind of need to go over the points that I've made by doing demos." Yeah, so that's good. Looking forward to seeing how they get on, because I think there's about 15 people doing it in the company, so it'll be interesting to see how they go on. But the minute they hear the words exam, they're like, "Oh, I don't want to do an exam." Yeah,
that's very true. Actually, I've recommended AZ 900 to quite a lot of people I've worked with in the past, and I think I've not done it myself. In some ways, I wish I had. So a lot of people if you're going on to do other Microsoft exams, some people say do AZ 900, even if you're experienced in Azure, to get used to the exam process. And it makes it a lot less nerve-wracking when you get through to the next bit. And maybe I should have done that in hindsight. But that aside, no, I recommended it. But it is one of those things that as soon as you mention exams, people start to go, "Oh, actually, I'm not sure it's for me." And I think, but there is a lot of good content around AZ 900. I just getting that understanding of what an SLA is. Yeah,
exactly. And the good thing is there's like 50 test questions now, and they're not really that. They're not. It's not scary when you're on, like 15 people are watching you and you bring it up and you go through it. They're kind of going, "All right, okay, it's not really that bad." And I'm like, "Well, it's it's multiple choice, and the questions aren't like 10 lines. It's like a couple of lines, and then you pick one." So as long as I'm giving them the high level kind of 30,000 feet view, they don't need the detail that I'm going into, but I always like to try and explain the detail just to try and kind of confirm their knowledge. But yeah, once you show them the AZ900 practice test, they're all like, "Oh, that's not too bad." So yeah, we'll see how we go on. It's interesting teaching people, though. I've learned a lot from teaching people. Need to slow down when I'm talking, and then make sure I go over things. And just what I was saying there, the hands-on viewing the portal has helped an awful lot. Yeah, but you should still do AZ900. I actually learned 2 things doing AZ900 that I didn't even know. So here's Andrew's got a question. Let's show that one. So how are the administrator and developer exams? Well, yeah, I'll let you go first, and then I'll have a go at that one. What do you think? What do you think of the exams?
Yeah, so I haven't done the administrator one.
Really?
So no, because I did the as I said, I did the developer exam, then I went across and did the solutions architect exams, which at the time was separate from the administrator path. So I imagine that they're not too dissimilar from the administrator, but yeah, I didn't quite do that. The developer exam, it was obviously the exam content is kind of under NDA, but the general feel of it because it's kind of getting that balance between writing code, which is often the developer's day job, and configuring Azure in order to get an Azure function in place to Cosmos DB or whatever it might be. And the exam tries to obviously cover both of those, but it can't get you to write code because it needs to be able to mark the test. So it tries its best to do that, but yeah, it's hard to kind of say. I think overall it was useful as a coming for it as someone that is accessing Azure as a developer. It teaches you about the different types of SQL offering, the different types of container offerings, the different options around serverless and PaaS and things like that. And that I think is really important. Just understanding what options are available. If you think about containerization, there's 4 ways of running a container in Azure. It's probably more than that. And if you ask most of the teams that I work with, they probably couldn't name them and say which one was the best to use. So having an understanding that there are all these offerings and which one's the best to use, be that for containers or databases or things, I think is actually a really useful, because otherwise you might pick, I can say the wrong one. There's probably not a wrong one, but the one that isn't optimum for your solution. But is it like?
Sorry, Nico.
I was going to say it's not like the old developer exams where you were literally. It's not code focused. The developer exam is, as a developer, how can I get the best out of Azure? That's probably the best.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Andrew's also asking, is it relatively easy? Well, I don't think it is, because in my view, you have to be using these things. But if you want, if you're not a developer, it's quite tricky, I would suggest, unless you're doing these if you get some hands-on practice, then you're fine. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I like the way now that there are the different levels of the exams. You have your sort of AZ 900, I can't remember what they call it, but the foundation ones, that's it. You have your associate and you have your expert, which means that depending on your experience, you can choose the right exam for you. The developer exam and the administrator exams are those associate middle level ones. And you do need to be using them in order to get the most out of, to make it as easy for you to pass as possible, but also to get the most out of it. I think if you, back at the beginning of my career, back in 2005, when I took some Microsoft exams right at the very beginning of my career, and the Microsoft exams are very different now, but I was learning to pass those exams. I think when I revisited the exams and kind of went back to them later on, and I said I started about 2 years ago when I went back to them, having experience meant that I got a lot more out of the learning process, and I got a lot more out of the overall thing. So yeah, easy is hard to define because it does depend on your experience. The fact they're multiple choice doesn't make them easy.
I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy. It's not easy because you need to know quite a lot of different tools. There's quite a lot of different developer tools there. I don't think it's straightforward. The admin exam, I would recommend everyone does. If you're using Azure, even you, John, I would recommend you have a look at it. Yeah. Gives you a good background of how to administer it and stuff like that. You probably know a lot of it.
Yeah. So the solutions architect covered the technologies part of the solution architect covered all the RBAC, the policies, things like that. But it also covered
overlap.
The backup and all of the migration tools and things like that. And I found that really interesting and very useful, as you say, even as someone who's not, building out, well, who's using it from more of a developer perspective, that understanding the permissioning model and the policies is a really useful, and even things like management groups, blueprints, all of that is super useful.
Yeah. Andrew's got, do you have any LinkedIn learning modules to recommend? I do, Andrew, and I'll ping you later on. I can't think of, there's a lady who I know called Nicole, who I can't remember, Nicole Stevenson on LinkedIn has been doing LinkedIn learning for AZ305. So I'll get in touch and I'll ping you those links. He's also asking, if I wanted to teach, create content to help, can you help guide me, Greg? Yes, absolutely. We might do a show on, I'm going to do one stream on the tools that I'm using, so I can show you how to go about at least doing this, because it's not too bad. But yeah, I'll be in touch. I'll ping you on LinkedIn after this, and we can have a chat. But yeah, we should do guides on how to create content and stuff like that as well. That would be good. Right, John, I think we're just about out of time. So before we go, I just wanted to show, if you want to get in contact, oh, hang on, I need to get this banner first. I'm clicking all the wrong buttons as usual. Classic. Oh no, it's comments. I need to get into the comment. Right, so if you want to catch up with John, you can reach out to John on Twitter. That's his Twitter. Well, it's not Twitter anymore, but you know what I mean. x.com/John Kilmister. And John's blog is blueboxes.co.uk. So you can find these blog posts on the accessibility and also the Azure load test and lots more. I found myself on your blog more than once, John. So I meant to ping you and forgot to ping you about that. So that's awesome. Okay, cool. So just before we go, hang on, there's another couple of comments. Andrew's got a question here. Would be good regarding how to get started on this yet. Okay, Andrew, I think you should come on. You're always on asking loads of questions. I think I need to get you on and cover some stuff. So maybe we should do that. What are you going to say?
The way I would do it with any of the exams, go have a look at the skills measured. It lists all of the things that you need to cover. Then the way I do it is I work through that list as a very first pass to go, okay, I need to focus on this, probably not so much on this, not so much on that. And then I go away and look for learning content on those particular things I want to focus on. And then, as Greg said, there are practice tests, which can then go, am I nearly there? Am I ready? Am I not? And then go back around the loop until you feel comfortable.
The one thing I would add to that is if I'm doing I'll give you an example. I did the Cosmos DBE exam and I didn't really use Cosmos. So I did the practice test first. Now that sounds crazy, but I got like 20% and I was like, right, okay. So then what I do is I do this, then doing the studying. And then when I think I'm getting it, I go back and do the score. And as long as my score's going up, I don't even need to sit the exam. I now know that I've learned something and it's stuck, so that's a good start, even just with that. But then I'll keep going. And then if I see my score get to about 80, 90%, then I'll probably book the exam. But I actually tell people to start off and almost scare yourself on how little you know. And then it might perks me into like, I want to know more. I'm going to go and read about this. So Andrew, I'm going to ask you if you want to come on. I'll reach out to you. Maybe you should come on and I'll talk you through how I would do getting started on an exam. That might be a good session. Right, cool. Right, John, thank you very much. I'm just going to play a little outro video, but thanks for coming on. And if you ever want to come on and talk about anything else, just give me a shout and you're more than welcome to come on. But good to catch up with you. I'll catch up with you once we finish in 2 seconds, but let me just...
Yeah, it's great talking. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And let me get rid of the banners. Let's just do that and then just go. Right, so I'll just play a wee thank you video. So tomorrow I'm on with Luke Money, who's joining me from Australia, probably about 6 o'clock in the morning. Again, we're just going to chat about what he's been up to Azure-wise and stuff like that. I met him at Ignite and he's a really nice guy. There's a lot of great Azure content, so we'll talk about some of that. He's got a really good newsletter that covers a ton of stuff that we should all subscribe to, so I'll be sharing that as well. That's tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. So I don't know what time. I think it's 6 in the morning for him, poor boy. But he did agree to come on, so that's fine. And that's it. So let me just say thanks again, John, and thanks everyone for watching.